I'm joined now by the founder of All Rise News, Adam Klasfeld. Adam, we have been watching as the Trump administration continues to bear down heavily on media outlets, and that includes his existing lawsuit against the New York Times. We now have a major update as far as that case is concerned. Can you explain what just happened in court?
Well, it took less than a week, Brian, for a judge to just brutally smack down the Trump lawsuit against the New York Times. He called it, and here's the operative, here's the key sentence from the ruling. A complaint is not a megaphone for public relations or a podium for a passionate oration at a political rally or a functional equivalent of a Hyde Park speaker's corner. And he spent all of 4 pages just witheringly dressing down the fact that this complaint was full of praise for his business acumen, talking about his historic victory. As a matter of fact, one of the parts of this ruling just simply summarizes the lawsuit. And there are lines that begin, the reader of the complaint must labor through the allegations. A reader must endure an allegation of him talking about winning the election in historic fashion, for example, trouncing his opponent, quote unquote. He talks about the enervating prose. It's filled with mockery. And here's the thing, Brian. This judge, Stephen Merriday, is a George H.W. Bush appointee, a very conservative judge, by the way, in the Middle District of Florida. And it's basically him calling out the buffoonery, frankly,
Yeah.
of the lawsuit, simply just filled with, attacks on the newspaper that aren't even related to the complaint. He complains about, for example, the endorsement of Kamala Harris early on in the complaint and pleads a ridiculous definition of actual malice that doesn't actually have to do with actual malice, claiming that essentially the New York Times is out to get him, which has nothing to do with the legal definition of actual malice. And what happened today was the judge said, try again.
Now, in terms of Trump's willingness to actually continue to push this thing forward, is there anything preventing him from doing that? Can he appeal? Was it dismissed with prejudice? Like, where do we stand right now in terms of the continued existence of this lawsuit?
So, the technical nature of this is the original complaint is stricken. So this is actually a highly technical ruling that it didn't meet the Rule 8 procedures just to get out throughout the gate. And so what the Trump legal team said that they will be refiling the complaint without all of this self-aggrandizement, without the
Is
attack.
that even possible to file a lawsuit that comes from Donald Trump without the self-aggrandizement?
Well, we'll see what they submit soon. They have 25 days to do it. Here's the thing, Brian, they have the first complaint out there. It's been through the news cycle. They have the press release out there. We'll see if they can cut it down to about half the length as the judge is demanding here. Team Trump now has to cut it down to 40 pages or less, and we'll see the case go forward. But the kind of question remains, when you cut the fat from it, is there any meat left?
Now, in the event that this lawsuit doesn't go forward, what kind of precedent does that set for his other existing attacks on media companies? I understand that this would happen at the trial court, so there's no binding legal precedent. In fact, there's no legal precedent because it's not at the appeals court level. But what kind of atmospheric precedent does this have?
Well, this is one of a series of lawsuits that Trump is filing in and before his second term to try to chill the press.
Yeah.
And sometimes he's had success with it. It happened with ABC, CBS, where he gets settlements for over cases that most legal experts didn't really find a lot of merit in.
Right.
He wields these lawsuits as a cudgel. As a matter of fact, the lead attorney behind this lawsuit is Alejandro Brito, who's the same lawyer whose lawsuit we've spoken about, Brian, against the Wall Street Journal's parent company and their reporters over the letter that we now know is 100% legitimate, the one that he sent to Jeffrey Epstein that was authenticated by nothing less than Epstein's estate given to Congress and
Yeah.
publicly released. They're still pursuing that lawsuit. It's the same legal team that just got this judicial smackdown today.
And can the Wall Street Journal, for example, look at some of the arguments that the New York Times would be able to make against Trump and use some of those arguments in their own existing case?
Well, the interesting thing about this ruling is it happened before there were any arguments. This was a judge simply looked at the complaint
Right.
and said, this is not an acceptable complaint. So I don't think it's going to do so much with precedent, but it does hopefully put some wind in the sails of other media organizations facing ridiculous lawsuits from the Trump administration while they use litigation to try to intimidate the press, when they use the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr, to try to threaten media organizations to suspend Jimmy Kimmel. I think that we need to view all of this through that same prism. This is more than a legal case and more than the a defamation law and precedent. This is an act of intimidation. So in that sense, Brian, the victory here, even if there isn't a real precedent to hearken to, we'll see. It should be wind in the sails because it's a judge saying right out the gate, this is ridiculous.
Well, the irony of that is that when Trump doesn't have leverage over certain institutions or certain outlets and they go to court and they win, none of that is surprising, right? And there's no reason for them to capitulate. But it's only in the instances where these major media outlets are so over leveraged, like CBS, like ABC, and they know that even though they have a winning lawsuit on their hands, because the Trump administration has taken on some action that is so blatantly, nakedly unconstitutional, still they need something from this administration. In the case of ABC News, you've got Nexstar that needs approval of a merger with Tegna, so that they can show affiliate, so that their affiliate channels can be in something like 80% of American homes. They can't do that without FCC approval. And so they kind of put themselves in a position where they opt to capitulate to Trump, knowing full well that his arguments against them are baseless, but they still recognize the extent to which they're over leveraged, and he can exploit that weakness for an otherwise home run win.
Absolutely, I think that's exactly right. And you mentioned Nexstar's merger with Tegna. They're with the Paramount settlement. There was
Right.
all the talk about the Skydance merger, which was mysteriously approved by Brendan Carr as soon as the settlement happened. So it is an awful thing to face a federal lawsuit by one of the most powerful individuals in the world, and a lot of people just want to make it go away. But I think today's ruling from this judge kind of shows the kind of lawsuits that we're dealing with here. One that was just witheringly dressed down by by a very, very conservative judge who found that just on its face, before anyone has made an argument, before the New York Times said a word in defense of this lawsuit, he just smacked it down in the most mocking language and said that it was tedious. He said that it was unacceptable, and he ordered them to write what is essentially a sober and serious complaint.
Well, that's not an embarrassment just to the Trump administration, and it's clearly an embarrassment to the Trump administration. It's also an embarrassment to all of the media organizations and outlets that do opt to entertain or capitulate to this Trump team that's engaged in such farcical prosecutions. I mean, when you look at the extent to which the people who actually fight back, whether it's the law firms or the universities or the New York Times or any outlet that does opt to take these joke lawsuits to court, and when they inevitably either win or don't even get far enough to win before the judge just throws the whole thing out, that shines a spotlight, that underscores just how much the ABCs of the world and CBSs of the world chose to neuter themselves in deference to this guy when very clearly they could have just fought any of this and won, because what Trump is doing is so blatantly unconstitutional, such an egregious overreach, such a stunning breach of free speech rights and the First Amendment. And yet you have these people, at ABC, at CBS, who are just so focused on consolidating more wealth for themselves and their shareholders, because they want to just continue to engage in these mergers and acquisitions and try to get themselves in front of more people and deliver more shareholder value. It is so money focused that they allow themselves to be completely humiliated by this administration, that anytime they go into court, they get laughed out of the courtroom. And yet that's almost makes a bigger mockery of the people who do choose to engage in this stuff and allow themselves to be rolled by Trump.
Absolutely. And of course, this week, with everything going on with Jimmy Kimmel, we're very focused on media and media companies, news organizations. But if we pull out the picture a little bit, and every sector of civil society, it's followed the same pattern you're talking about, Brian. There's the major law firms, all the major law firms that fought back against unconstitutional executive orders, to have the Trump administration bully them about who they can and cannot hire and associate with, and yanking certain privileges that whether that they cannot enter a federal building if they work for such a law firm. One federal judge after another keeps smacking down these unconstitutional executive orders.
Right.
The ones that fight back win. Same thing with Harvard University so far. When they have fought back and they won, while other universities are capitulating, and it shows that as you're saying, some of the ones that folded in big law, like the major media companies, were some of the most wealthy and powerful law firms in the world. They knew they could have defended this. They chose not to, and they were run circles around by smaller law firms that stood up for the rule of law. And it's a real message for media companies. Are they going to take this? Are they going to take this naked attempt at journalist intimidation dressed up as a lawsuit?
Yep.
And if they do, independent media needs to pick up
Yeah.
where institutional media is failing.
And I'm glad you said that, because, we are seeing these failings happen left and right. And it's creating a major sense of disillusionment in terms of what legacy media actually stands for. And I think most of us are recognizing the extent to which, while they hid behind their flashy slogans of democracy dies in darkness and the esteemed fourth estate, that in reality these people are looking out for themselves and their shareholders, and it's all about just their bottom line. It's about finances for them. And so in light of this massive failure at the hands of legacy media, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to support independent media outlets. Adam, you do it better than anybody else. So I would highly recommend, for everybody who's watching right now, if you'd like to support fearless independent journalism, please sign up for All Rise News. I'm going to put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Adam does an amazing job. I think you can see that by the conversation that we just had. And so if you've not yet signed up for his Substack, highly recommend you sign up. It is a great read and a great way to support independent media more broadly, especially in light of these failings by legacy media. So Adam, as always, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Brian. Always a pleasure.